Whoa. Just testing everybody. Welcome to the April 27th meeting of the Rotary Club of South Jacksonville. It's great to see everyone here today, live and via Zoom. Thanks for your patience via Zoom. I'd like to thank all of our stand-in greeters today. There was quite a crowd. We have a very nice crowd here today. I'm happy to see everyone. I know everyone feels the same way. Past president-elect, not past president, not yet. Richard Dow, prayer in the pledge. Come on up, Richard. You just want me to fast forward to the next year.
I liked it that way. Let's say the pledge first. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Usually I offer a prayer at this time, but today I thought a meditation. It's very short. And it goes like this. If God exists, why evil? If God is love, why sorrow? If God is a father, why death? If I have knocked, why is he not open to me? Wait. Believe in him not out of self-interest, but out of love. If you want to reach the promised land, you must accept the scandal of all the things you don't understand right to the limits. Having faith means believing that he fills all space, that no moment or distance can cast me out from his arms. Having faith means believing that he knows everything, that before I arrive, he runs through the infinitely complicated plan of my existence all the way to its conclusion, like an ever new problem solved by his infinite love. Amen.
Thank you, Richard. Christy, do you have a family of Rotary for us today, please?
Yes, thanks, President Tom. So we have one birthday this week. Crystal Brohan is celebrating her birthday on April 28th. And then for wedding anniversaries, Maria O'Keefe and her husband Tucker are celebrating 9 years of marriage on also April 28th. And then for member anniversaries, Ben Samuels celebrated his 5 years with Rotary on April 26th. Stephen Jones will celebrate 8 years with Rotary on April 30th, and past President Bill Jaycock will celebrate 26 years with Rotary on May 2nd.
Thanks, Christy. Some long
President Tom.
years there. So our next project coming up, I know you're waiting to hear what this will be work in conjunction with communities and schools. And Julia Kalinsky is going to chat with us about that. Aren't you, Julia?
Yes, would love to. Thanks, President Tom. Yes, we are supporting communities and schools over the next month and a half or so. And there is a list that was sent out in the gear of all the items that they need. We're doing back to school supplies. You can order it online. That's kind of the preferred way. It'll get shipped directly to their organization and they'll collect everything that we send, and then we'll have a service project on the 17th of June to put everything together and leave it there in the warehouse so they can distribute it when they need it. So really excited about that. So please go ahead and start contributing if you can, and look out for that service project announcement.
Thanks, Julia. Julia, did you have something you wanted to tell us about our Rotaract project?
Yes, our the photo. We actually received the first prize. It's a very large trophy for fundraising. We were the title sponsor for the event. Raised center, so they're going to be furnished 3 of their rooms, and it's really exciting. And I'll go ahead and send that picture in the next year so you can enjoy it. I don't have it with me.
Good. Where is that? Where is that trophy, Julia?
That trophy is still at with past president of our Rotaract Club, Sarah Corrigan. I could not fit it in my car, so I will get that to you.
Hey, we're all about the trophies. Thank you. Hey, Jay, did Julia miss anything on that? Anything you need to follow up with?
The only thing I would say is that I think Julia can correct me, but I think there's a way when you contribute online through the wish list to note that it was from our club, so that, you know, they can keep track of how much we generously offer. And even though we were encouraging people to give online, there was the option to bring it to a meeting as well. And we'll make sure that gets to CIS if you're not able to do it online.
Great. Thanks, Jay. So yeah, so this couldn't be any easier. You can go on Amazon while you're ordering something for yourself for tomorrow, and you can do that for CIS. And if you want to bring it in, we're happy to take it here. So we will be prompting you on all of that every week, right, Julia?
Great.
All right. So I think next week, Crystal, yeah, we have a foundation presentation, don't we?
We do.
We do, right.
Secret.
Yeah, it's a secret. So that's why I'm telling you, you know. But yeah, so be sure and be here. And I know you'll enjoy it because Crystal's going to do a great job with that. And so I was going to bring up past President Bill for a membership moment. But you don't have to because right. Hey, so yeah, well, I was going to say that. Where's all those little forms you had? They're right there. I know. Yeah. So so Bill's going to distribute those, right, even as we speak. So so take a moment so that Bill doesn't have to email you because, you know, no one's getting enough of those. And try and react to that, and send us some names so that we can make some things happen around here from a membership standpoint, because we're also working toward having things for new and prospective members to attend. And to that point, and I know Lisa Marie is like, oh my gosh, she's going to ask me to come up here, but I'm not. How about that? Yeah. Okay. Right. So we have some several events are upcoming. There is the Treaty Oak Park cleanup project, which we should have all of the info we need by next week, right? Yes, good. And we're also talking about a business after hours social at Blue Bamboo, and a jumbo shrimp baseball game, you know, family oriented again. That was the thing I wanted to follow up on with the CIS backpack project, family oriented. So we would encourage as many youngsters, whether they're children or grandchildren, as possible to help us out with that as well. And so do we have, yes.
And we confirmed May 11th with Manifest for a happy hour. And Jim Webb's going to speak on June 15th.
Did everybody hear that?
May 11th, happy hour, Manifest Distilling.
Right.
And Jim Webb will be our speaker June 15th.
So May 11th.
May 11th.
Manifest Distillery.
Yes, happy hour, tour and happy hour.
Did everybody hear that? Yes. We'll have to circle back on that. Great. Yeah, yeah, I heard that. Samples. So also too, I want to remind the incoming board and avenue directors that there is a district assembly on May 8th from 9 to 1 that you need to log in and attend. That's just a few of you, not everyone, but put that on your calendar as well. And let's see, is Lynn Bowman here? Is Lynn here? Is Lynn there? Oh, good. A volunteer to introduce visitors and guests. Any past presidents out there want to come rise to the occasion? Harlan. All
Can I lower the
right.
bar?
Pardon me?
May I lower the bar?
You may.
Okay. So I have no list. I'm coming off the bench, so I'll just ask the question out here in live land. Do we have any visiting Rotarians today? How about? Yeah. How about Zoomville? Do we have any visiting Rotarians on Zoom? Do we have any guests that the members would like to introduce today? William and Skip have already been introduced as visiting Rotarians. How about Zoomland? Yeah, Jason, right.
I know, right?
In person.
Is this your second trip back?
Feels like my first.
All right, take it away, Maestro.
Once you ever get the song. So it's pretty classic to be up here when I say things like, hey, looking for a volunteer to introduce visitors and guests. It's just great. We need to flip the next time, if there is a next time, we need to flip that camera around. That's pretty priceless. Thank you, Harlan, very much. Tamara, would you like to introduce our speaker today?
I would love to.
Come on.
I am happy to introduce Mr. Michael Bender. Is it Bender or Binder? Bender. He is Faculty Director, Public Opinion Research Lab, and Associate Professor in Political Science at the University of North Florida. Today, Michael will be discussing polling in the 2020 elections, what went right and what went wrong. And also UNF efforts this past fall, both with what the university did in Florida and their partnerships with Siena College, Times, and what this means for the future of polling. We are all very interested. Thank you, and let's welcome Mr. Michael Bender.
So thank you very much. I will try to make your afternoon at least mildly entertaining. If I don't impart much knowledge on you, hopefully you can enjoy yourselves this afternoon. Maybe it needs to be over by you. It looks like you've been drafted.
Let's see,
A little, that guy down arrow,
it's not working.
button or something. We'll get there. Technology has been a little bit of a struggle today, but we'll figure it out. Great, perfect. All right, you're going to be clicking, it looks like. So this is the Public Opinion Research Lab. This is where I do most of my work. I'm on faculty at UNF and running the lab, and we do a litany of different survey projects. The stuff that gets the attention in the media is our political work. We've done a lot of local work over the years and statewide as well. But in this past election cycle, we did partner with the New York Times, and we polled across the country. So we were very busy, and that gave me not only an insight into how we handled what we do, but also how the preeminent pollsters in this country have handled what they did as well. So in 2016, there was a lot of hand wringing about polling and how off it was and a lot of the problems that occurred. But based on the big problems that were identified, theoretically, it should have been fixed for 2020. Right? There was a lack of reputable polls late in the election in the Midwest. Well, that wasn't a problem in 2020. There were polls all over the Midwest at the state level and all across the country for that matter. Education. Oftentimes, again, prior to 2016, folks didn't necessarily consider education as a big, important demographic to weight their top line data to. Those in the survey industry are well aware higher levels of education are disproportionately more likely to respond for surveys for a host of different reasons. In the past, it never mattered. In 2016 and since then, it's really begun to heavily correlate with vote choice. So folks do that now. All reputable pollsters do that now. So that shouldn't be an issue. The urban-rural splits, even when you're calling the state of Florida, for example, and we split ours up by DMAs, when we make sure we get enough people, so we're not getting all people from Jacksonville, for example, in Florida. Even within DMAs, there's variation across urban and rural areas. The higher quality pollsters, ourselves and Sienna included, made efforts to extract responses from splitting DMAs into urban and rural areas. Not everybody did that, but the better ones did do that this time. And then finally, there's something that no polls can control for: late deciders. Right? Polls are only as good as the people we're talking to. If you don't know who you're going to vote for up until the very last minute, right? In 2016, there were a lot of folks that were Republicans that just couldn't quite wrap their heads around Donald Trump. But ultimately, when they went to vote in that Tuesday in November, they couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton until they came home to the Republican Party. In 2020, there were many, many fewer late deciders. So that shouldn't have been the problem. But as you saw, polls statewide here in Florida, most of them were leaning toward Trump. These are the national polls. Biden was plus 4.5 ultimately in these national polls leading up to. So, that's something we were, at least the polls got it sort of right, even though he won by 4.5, they had him at 7.5 or 8. So that's 3.5 to 4 percentage points that the national polls were overestimating Biden's support. Similar story for Florida. The average there that's kind of hidden behind the Zoom, I think Florida was about +1 or +2 Biden leading into the election. Obviously, Trump won by a little more than 3 points here in Florida. Our last in-person, our last live caller poll, we had Trump losing by 1 to Biden, but well within the margin of error. But again, for me, right, that's not good enough. What can we do to make it better? I feel that we need to do better on these big elections because we do really well on the other elections. So what happened in 2020? Right? If the national polls are at 7 to 8% for Biden, and this is across the board, there was a couple that were outliers, but by and large, everybody was heavily Biden. Where's that 3 percentage points? So let's do better. There were lots of statewide races, so theoretically they should have been good. But even at the statewide race with the Senate races, typically the Democratic error was about the same as it was for Trump. So there's a handful of questions that might have been talked about, certainly right after the election, about potential explanations. Was it late deciders? Was it rural voters? Did polls miss Hispanic support for Trump? Are Trump supporters lying to pollsters? Or, and this is more the camp that I'm coming down in, differential non-response. So different groups of people are not responding or not answering our questions at different rates, and that can lead to some problems. So talking about polls and when they're good and when they're bad, and it's always good for me to get the opportunity to talk to regular people, right? Not people that are soaked in this and understand this all the time, but normal people that have an interest and care a little bit about politics. Polls struggle when voters struggle. So primaries are notoriously difficult to poll on because generally speaking, most of the candidates roughly have similar policy perceptions. So it's not like it's a big jump to move from candidate X to candidate Y to candidate Z within a primary. Think back to even the last presidential primary, if you're a Democrat in 2020 or meaningful primaries if you're a Republican in 2016. There's movement in the polls dramatically. That's because oftentimes people move, right? You might have your preferred candidate, but there might be a handful of candidates you'd be willing to support. And there might be a couple in there that you're just, I don't like them at all. But when you have primaries, little policy differences, people don't usually pay attention until late in the process anyway. So when we're calling a month out, they really haven't dialed in. There's not a lot of difference. And a lot of these candidates have little to no name recognition. And that's even at the presidential level. Forget about if you're polling for a governor's race or a Senate race in the primaries. And we're coming up on that, right? Elections are always right around the corner. So we'll be talking about the Democratic primary for the governor's race and potentially the Senate race too. And then the other places where voters struggle are down ballot races. So not president, not Senate, not governors, but maybe public defenders races or local city council races where people don't know any of these people, then nobody's heard of them. Those are difficult. And then other things that are hard are when you have local districts, right? Who knows I don't want to, just answer this to yourself. Who can name to me the governor of Florida? Yeah, most of you can, right? How about the senators? Most of you can name those two guys too. Name your congressman. All right. Name your state senator. All right. Your state house member. Presumably everybody here lives in Jacksonville city limits, or Duval County at least. Not only name your one city council member that represents your district, but the 5 at-large members. Yeah, right. Don't forget, that's a real stretch. Forget it if you live at the beaches, where we have our own mayor and city council members. And again, they have some at-large and some district-based. Oh yeah, don't forget there's school board races too. No idea. I couldn't even begin to, I probably couldn't even name a couple of people that are even on the school board, right? So it's difficult for voters to answer questions that they have no idea about, and we shouldn't expect them to. And the other place where voters struggle are ballot measures, right? We've all looked at the complicated language in these ballot measures, and it's difficult for voters to know where they stand on those as well. But when polls should succeed is when voters are sure about their choices, when you have partisan races, when you have a D or an R to identify where folks are going. That's a good help. When you have active campaigns, when you have stark policy differences, when you have known candidates. That sounds like November of 2020 to me, right? Like all of those boxes get checked when you talk about Trump and Biden. And then also the other piece of this is when the science and the art come together. And there's another talk that I used to give, that the art and science of polling. It's not just science. There's a lot of art to this and understanding when to do what and how to do things. But when you have live callers, when you're calling cell phones, believe it or not, some phones don't call cell phones. I mean, it's crazy to me to think that. And when you have skilled methodologists to know how to marry those two processes. And then the key for regular people that don't spend their life thinking about these things is, trusted polling organizations, people that people that you've heard of, people that are clear about their methodology. Those are good cues to trust the information that's being given to you. And I'll say this to anybody that wants to talk to me, right? Not all polls are created equally. And, we have an A/B rating from 538, and 538 is not the only pollster rating organization. They're probably just the most well-known, the best one in Florida. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what I've done for UNF to get us there. But not everybody does that. Not everybody is clear with their methods, right? Trafalgar Group got a lot of attention coming into this election, and he was on TV a ton and done a bunch of radio leading up to the election. Their methods are a black box. Like I've looked and looked and looked, and I have no idea how they do their polls. I don't know how they weight their data. I don't know where their respondents come from. I have no clue, and nobody does. They won't tell you. That worries me as a scientist, right? In believing in transparency. Those are the troubles that worry me. So what can you do as a consumer of this information? Polls get thrown at us. Obviously, during the heat of an election, it's every stinking day, all the time. Find out who conducted the poll, right? It's not just about the top lines, right? It's what goes into them. How were the voters contacted? Was it an online poll? Is it a panel? Was it an RDD selection on the phone? If you're talking about elections, it's not just if you're talking about adults or registered voters, but likely voters. An adult population is very different than a registered voter population. A registered voter population is different than a likely voter population, even for a general election. Forget about if you're running an election that's in March of 2023 and you're maybe staring at 30% turnout, right? Those are all different models and different expectations for who's going to show up, and that can impact your estimates. And the other piece of this, and the media does a terrible job, and across the board media, all media, for a lot of different reasons, do a terrible job of explaining that polls are not point estimates. Yes, they'll tell you it's going to be 52 to 48, but the way to think about these are much more like a rusty butter knife as opposed to a scalpel. Right? These are blunt instruments. They are not 52 to 48. The science behind margins of error and estimating, it's a much broader thing. Yeah, if you have a poll that comes out and it's 70 to 30, you can feel pretty confident that the person with the 70 is in much better shape. But if it's 52-48, it might as well be a coin flip. And that's what the polling industry has not done a good enough job educating the media on how to communicate that to regular people. So those are all things that I think are worth being aware of as consumers of this information. So this is what we did in 2020 and our results. So we polled in Florida on the presidency, on CD4, and then we did all 8 ballot measures that were at the statewide level, and we also polled on the JEA referendum locally. And in the first column on the left in the black, that was the election results. So Trump by a little over 3, Rutherford won by 22, the ballot measures 79, 61, 57, et cetera, et cetera. The third column over is what we polled. Right? We had Biden +1, it's in red, we were wrong on that one. We were right on every other race that we polled on. The Rutherford race I didn't think was hard. I mean, I don't know anybody that thought Deegan was going to win. I don't even know if her camp thought she was going to win. But yeah, she might be, we might see her in the news again soon. So she might be busy in 23. But the Rutherford race we had, and then if you look at those ballot measures, I was really blown away. 6 of the 8 ballot measures, we were within a point or 2, which is crazy to me. The fact that we did so well estimating these ballot measures, and with a 60% passage rate for, the ballot measures need 60% to pass, we really got, minimum wage right. We got some of these more closely decided ones, and I was really impressed by that. And the other piece is we were really spot on with all this other stuff, but we were off with the general election. So why is that? What's going on, right? We were off by a little over 4 points. Even considering in 2020, we did things differently than we had in the past. So we made a concerted effort to reach the hard to reach voters. And we've all heard about the Trump voters that don't want to talk to people and they're hard to get on surveys. They don't want to take the census, all those kinds of things. So we really made an effort to reach those folks. The other thing we did was we for our turnout model, we looked at 2016 as our estimate for what turnout would be as opposed to 2018, which was a heavy Democratic run. And then we also, figuring out for all these polls, there's guesswork involved in who's going to show up. We don't know who's going to show up a week, a month, from now. But figuring out who those folks might be helps us at least try to be better in our predictions going forward. So this is just some demographics. It might be a little bit hard to see, but on the left-hand column is what our survey looked like as far as demographics. And in the third column there, the official turnout is what that looked like. So for our survey, we predicted it would be 38, 39, 23, Democrat, Republican, Independent. It turned out it was 37, 39, 24. So we overestimated Democratic turnout by less than a percentage point. Sex, we estimated at 46 to 54, male to female. It was 45.5 to 54.5. So we were within half a percentage point. For race, we estimated at 61 white, 14 black, 17 Hispanic, 8 others. Turned out it was 64 white, 12.4 black, 16.2 Hispanic, 7.3 others. So we overestimated some of the minorities. We were under on the white vote. That probably contributed a little bit to some of the point differential between Biden and Trump. And then for the age categories, we have 6 categories, 18 to 24, 25, 35, 35, et cetera, all the way on up. We were really, within a percentage point or so on all of those. We were really pretty good. And then for the geography, I alluded to this earlier, breaking up the state to make sure that we get enough respondents from everywhere. Typically, we would do 11, the 10 demographics. We would break that out. And then we'd also break out Miami from the Miami media market because it's just so different than Broward and Monroe counties. This time we did 18 different strata. We broke up the major urban centers and pulled out the high education counties. So places like Seminole County, we pulled that out of the Orlando media market. Pinellas, we pulled that out of the Tampa media market. So we really made a ton of effort. All of those were within a single percentage point as far as the ratio of people from each of those markets. So I think we did well there. And then the other piece, and we'll never really know the answer to this, is the educational makeup of the electorate. We estimated 70-30, no college degree to college degree. The problem is we don't have that true population data. It doesn't exist. So, you know, there's a little bit of guesswork there, but that's what our model looked like versus what actuality looked like. And I thought we did pretty well relative to some other folks. So what are some of these explanations and how did they do in 2020, right? Likely voter model, there's so many different pollsters doing so many different things, and they were all almost exclusively all leaning toward Biden. So it's probably not that. Late deciders, there were so few late deciders this time. And even with late deciders, even though they tend to break one way over the other, it's never 100%. So that's not going to be the exclusive decision maker either. Rural voters, even the pollsters like ourselves and Siena, they had in Florida, I want to say they had 30 something different strata that they broke their polls out into. I mean, they went over the top with theirs, and they still had a lot of the same problems. Missing Hispanic support was talked about in Arizona and Florida for pollsters missing. We only had Biden at +7 amongst Hispanics in Florida, you know, which isn't, you know, that crazy. In fact, that's much lower than Clinton was. And then the other one is the lying Trump supporters. Well, 90% plus of Democrats and Republicans said that they were voting for their candidate. So it doesn't make sense that that's really the answer either. Differential non-response is where I come down as being the bulk of the problem. So if you see that the table there, that is the percentage of Democrats that we call that ended in a completed survey. So 3.29% of the Democrats that we reached out to ended in a completed survey. Republicans was only 3.0%. The independents and the NPAs, others, libertarians, Greens, et cetera, we kind of lumped them together, 2.67%. So, okay, those are really small numbers. They don't seem that different. And if your likely voter model is roughly okay, this stuff should kind of wash out. Except if the Trump voting Democrats are different than non-Trump voting Democrats, and Trump voting NPAs are different than non-Trump voting NPAs. And I say that because if we're just looking to get X amount of NPAs, and the Trump folks are different, and they're much less likely to answer the phone, that's going to get filled in with Biden supporting NPAs. With Republicans, almost everybody, all the Republicans are voting for Trump, so it doesn't matter. So if we don't get some folks that are really opposed to phone surveys, it might be really supporters of Trump, that's okay, because it's going to get filled in with other Republicans that are going to vote for Trump anyway. But that NPA category, we don't know what that mix is. So this is what our NPAs looked like. And I never, prior to an election, thought about the demographic makeup of NPAs in my weighting scheme. It never crossed my mind. Our survey was males plus 10 points. The turnout was females +2. So it is, relative to the general population, a much more male-dominated group here. White, we only had it at 47%, 10% Hispanic, 30%, 10% Black, 10% Hispanic, 12% others. It was 59% white, so that's a big difference. It was 7% Black, 22% Hispanic. That's a big difference. So we were definitely much more Hispanic and African-American heavy than the ultimate results were. And then for the age turnout, we were light on older folks, bigger 65 plus turnout than our NPAs. So that's telling me that the folks that are answering our phones are younger and browner than the NPAs writ large. That's going to correlate with Biden votes. Ours were +10. We had Biden +10 amongst NPAs. If Biden was +10 amongst NPAs in Florida, he would have won the state. So clearly that was a problem for our survey work. So what does that mean going forward? Well, likely voter models are always going to be the challenge and figuring out who actually is going to show up. And that's going to be a problem for our industry no matter what we do. But the other thing that's more concerning to me are falling response rates. These response rates are really falling. They've plummeted in the last couple of years. And the big reason for that, in my opinion, is all of you and your cell phones. You guys, most cell phone companies now are instituting some form of spam blocking software and notifications. How many of you answer a call that says spam notification? Yeah, right. Yeah. I do because it's my business. You know, I take a lot of surveys because I answer those calls. If you're not picking up the phone, heck, my fiance's phone, it won't even ring. It just says potential spam notification. It gets dumped straight to voicemail. So these are circumstances where we're having much more difficult time getting through to people. And that's problematic for a lot of ways, because polls aren't just about generating some TV space and newspaper print, or I guess electronic headlines nowadays, prior to an election. Right? People use polls for a host of different issues. You know, think about JEA. Think about a lot of the other things that happen locally in policies. So it matters for democracy. But there are reasons for optimism, I think. You know, one, we do continually evolve. People thought the advent of the cell phone was going to be the death of the industry. It hasn't been yet. Also, adjusting people's expectations for what polls can do. And then the individual access that people have to polls today is so much better than it was 40 years ago. Oftentimes, 40 years ago, one person answered the phone in the household, disproportionately so. Now everybody's got a cell phone, so theoretically we can reach all of you individually. And then if this is a Trump effect that we've witnessed, you know, does that recede going forward? That's an unanswered question to this point. And then the other thing is, it's better than any of the alternatives, right? You know, it's better than just a random talking head standing up in a room full of people, me just kind of blurting out my opinions and my thoughts. So there's some data behind it. So I want to kind of leave there and thank you for the opportunity. And I want to open this up for questions literally about anything. I talked to 3 different people today. You know, I did Melissa Ross this morning talking about the census. So if you want to talk about polling or anything political, I'd be happy to chat. Yeah.
Statistics was the worst subject that took in college, and I hated it. But as I recall, to come up with the plus or minuses that the polls talk about, that's be a random survey. And from what you just showed us, only 3% of the people are even responding. And so I don't see how can it be random, and your models somehow, you know, since I was in college 5,000 years ago, they, you know, come up with other things where they don't have to be random that I wouldn't understand.
Yes to all of them.
Can you repeat his question?
So he was asking about the randomness of the survey, right? The basis of statistics and the fundamental foundation of this margin of error and the estimation is that every single, if you think about a big bucket of ping pong balls, you reach in, each ping pong ball has an equal opportunity of selection. And there's a randomness to that, so that then becomes reflective of the greater population. His point was that that's not, you know, look at all the stuff I just showed you, right? It's not random who's answering these phone calls. And you're absolutely right. There is, as time has gone forward, there is less and less randomness to this. The end result hasn't been dramatically different, right? I'm sitting up here talking about 3.5 percentage points on national averages. We were off by 4 points. I mean, that's not, you know, that's not 90-10 the other direction. So it's not terrible, but it's absolutely a concern. We go through great pains to try and reach all these people. We call them 5, 6, 7 times, you know, so we make efforts, but you're absolutely right. It is not random, and anybody that tells you it is lying to you about that. Yeah.
You indicated that there's a falling response rate on both parties. Is there a greater falling response rate on one party versus the other?
Yeah, so thinking about the dropping response rates amongst partisans, one, the independents are generally always harder to get a hold of because they're not as interested in the process. So if you think about, you know, polling here, right, you guys are probably all, you know, plugged in at least a little bit to politics. And because of that, you have a greater interest in it. And because of that, you can see the differences between the parties in much clearer focus than somebody who really doesn't care, right? I'll make a sports analogy. You know, I'm a professional football fan. No professional football, pay attention to. I care about my New York Giants. Right? I'm a season ticket holder. I know and care about it. I have a great friend, my best friend growing up. doesn't know a damn thing about the Giants or football, doesn't care, doesn't know anything about them. If I were to, he wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the Jets, the Giants, the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Jaguars. So if I asked him a question about football, he'd be like, I don't care. I'm not going to answer that question. I'm not going to waste my time. The partisans, generally speaking, are more interested and more invested. They're more likely to respond. The last several years under Trump, the Republican Party has shifted a little bit, and the types of folks that are in there are maybe less inclined to participate. And we've seen that. So Trump supporters, in particular, Republicans generally have been falling at greater rates. And that creates problems, particularly when you're thinking about how to overcome that going forward. Yes.
Two questions. So the first is, what would be the ideal response rate that you'd be looking for that you think adds credibility and showing a good direction, if you will?
So thinking about the ideal response rate, 100% sounds great to me. Realistically, you're never going to get that. If you're doing an RDD, like a random digit dial approximation of the public, you got to think a lot of the numbers that you're calling, and it depends how you think about response rates. A lot of numbers that you call, you never get an answer or phone or anything. It might not be a live number. There might not be a person on the other end of it ever. It might be Home Depot. So, if you can get response rates that are in the, realistically, the 25 to 30% range, that's enormous. And that's great. I think that's completely reasonable to expect to get enough. Again, unless there's a segment of the society that disproportionately doesn't respond.
The second part of that question, or the second question, in relation to, I keep hearing you talking about calling. What about texting? What about, social media? Because when, like, if I know, then I choose what I respond to.
Sure.
And so why the persistence on calling when you know that there's all of these obstacles?
Yes. So if it's not just calling, what about all the other stuff? Texting, web, social media type things. Calling has been kind of the gold standard for a lot of years. That's absolutely changing. We do all of the other stuff. We're actually going to be launching a panel publicly within the next several months, shifting to an all online operation. We'll still do the phone stuff, but we'll be adding that to our portfolio. There are concerns about that. And this gets back to the question about the randomness of this. There is no database of email addresses that you can randomly sample from and reach out to. There is that for phone numbers. Like, I can call half a dozen different companies today, and by 4 o'clock this afternoon, have 50,000 telephone numbers have been randomly generated for a particular geographic area. So that's part of the problem. The other aspect is the ability to meet a representative sample of the entire US is difficult in those online surveys. It's not impossible, but it's difficult, particularly when you're worried about voting. Older folks disproportionately turn out at much higher levels than younger folks. Older folks are also less technologically savvy than younger folks. So if you've got a pool where I know my 65 and 75-year-old, until they get to a point where they're infirmed, are much more likely to turn out. But the method that I'm using to contact people disproportionately leaves them out. That's problematic. And it also, the folks that are more likely to be tech savvy amongst that population have different political ideologies than those that are not likely to be tech savvy. So these are all, there is no, unfortunately, silver bullet to fix this, but there are things you need to be worried about and consider. Yeah.
Dr. Bender, what do your, I know you've done a lot of surveys and polls and a lot of different things for the JSO, for DUI and the FPOT for DUI awareness. What do the students, what have they enjoyed most of all the polling that you do? What do you see them gravitating?
Well, I tell you what, it's not. We did some work in Connecticut, talking about the projects that the students and the workers enjoy the most. We do some calling in Texas, and in Connecticut we've done. Texas, we do a health survey. It's brutally long, so that's awful for them. Same thing, we did one in Connecticut and Alaska, so they were calling till 1 in the morning several years ago. They weren't a fan of that. But the things that they do like are, in a lot of ways, the Duval kids anyway are the local stuff. You know, issues that matter to them that they're aware of and people that they know about. Yeah.
Are you aware of the telephone companies doing anything more significant so that when I do get a call, it's not going to be somebody giving me a new Medicare deal or
Your car warranty.
Yeah.
Don't forget your car warranty.
Yeah, I'm moving forward to those. Because any call we get, I finally got to the point, we just don't answer.
And we get lost in that. That's the problem. The survey industry is lost in that. They're putting up that spam blocking to help you, the consumer. We're roadkill on the side of that as a big giant, that's a big, broad effort to stop that problem. And we get lost, and that's bad for us. Now, there's people that might think that, us calling them is just as bad as car warranty. Yeah.
But if you subscribe to the theory that in a national presidential election, 45% of the people are going to vote Democratic, 45% are going to vote Republican, and who's going to be president depends on the swing of what happens.
I'm sorry to take.
Is a random polling of the entire population more predictive than trying to find that 10%?
The problem with that 10% theory is it's not just it's going to be 45. Who's going to turn out from that 45? That's really where a lot of the action is too. It's not just, 45D, 45R. It might be 42D, 47R. And that's meaningful. That wipes out any, differences in the middle. So that turnout aspect is vitally important. And that's something that's hard to gauge as well. So it's all of those things. It's not just the swing voters, those independents, those leaners, whatever. It's the base as well. Do they get turned off? Do they not like their candidate and not show up? Or are they extra motivated, right? If you look at the black vote in Florida, when Obama's on the ticket or when Gillum was on the ticket in 18, it's very different than it was in 16, and it's very different than it was in 20. Yeah.
I had an interesting poll recently, and at my advanced age, I can't remember, was it online?
Sure.
But I did answer the phone, and I responded to one, which I typically don't do. But there was an interesting question on there, because the one that, did you vote Democrat, did you vote Republican? And the one that caught my eye was, if you could go back at this point,
Would you change it?
would you change that? And I was thinking, it really struck me as something that I had not seen before. How much weight would you put on that for people who, let's just use as an example, our former president's
Sure.
actions after the election up
Sure.
to January 6th?
Sure.
Would that really resonate?
I mean, it's a fun question. It's an interesting question. The trick is, does that correlate with what they're going to do in 22 and what they're going to do in 24? And we don't know the answer to that. It's a fun question. I've seen it before. It's interesting. The one thing I will keep in mind, though, is people tend to lie about what they did in the previous election. The winning candidate does about 5 to 10 percentage points better. Oh yeah, I voted for that guy or girl. Yeah, absolutely. And they also lie about whether they turned out or not. By about 10 percentage points. Did you vote in this previous election? There's been several things that have done and verified vote history, and it can be anywhere from 5 to 10 percentage points. Yeah, I voted in that race. I voted for so-and-so. Yeah, he didn't vote. so there's a little bit of that too. Yeah.
Has the institution of early voting affected your polling?
Early voting, I think may have hurt the polling industry a little bit this year because Democrats were so disproportionately likely to vote early by mail. So if you're talking to a pollster and you say, how likely are you to vote? Very likely, oh, I mailed my ballot yesterday. You're 100% likely to vote. You're in the 100% category. If you're like, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to vote next Tuesday, you're not at 100%. You're below that. So it's possible that those mail ballots and the people that have taken that had been kind of overweighted in some of those surveys as well. I like it personally because it makes it easier for me to know people that have voted or not. And also, I just like to vote early because, you know, who knows, I might die. This way my vote counts. Thank you.
Do we have any Zoom questions?
Zoom land questions?
Crystal, do you see any?
No,
No.
I don't see any.
You hit it all.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your contribution and your honor to the Rotary Foundation for Polio Plus.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I will say this, and I don't know a ton about Rotary. I've talked to the one downtown. And
That's okay.
but whenever somebody is talking to me about vaccines, I'm like, man, remember when you were a kid and you had polio? And they're like, no. And I'm like, you're damn right. So thank you for the work that you guys do, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right. So here's your weekly reminder to continue to RSVP for any event that you wish to attend so that we can accommodate you. Thanks for your work so far. How have our RSVPs been, Patty? What? I know. Everybody loves it when I call on it. What? Oh, good, good. That's good. Good job. Good job. Also, remember to take a moment to fill out the membership forms, the little cards, the bill distributed. Take them with you. Don't leave them on the table. Yeah, everybody's like, yeah, okay. Next week, we'll have Dr. Madeline Zavodny speaking on the economics of immigration. And also, hey, Bill, do you have an update on John Combo's wife by any chance?
His wife came home on Saturday afternoon, but she's doing much better. She's regained most of her motor skills and doing well.
So I'm just going to tell you, she was involved in a terrible traffic accident this past week. John Combo's wife, Amy. Yeah. So, yeah, just so you all are aware, but things are better than they were. So that's good. Thanks, Bill. Okay, as we end our meeting, please join me in the Rotary motto. Service above self, one profits most, who serves best. See you next week.